G'day guys, sorry on the super long delay between the last catch up and now. As you can see, I bought a lathe. Holy crap, to say that I'm excited is probably an understatement. This has been something that's been on my kind of bucket list for many years, so I was fortunate enough, I was cruising around on Gumtree and I managed to spot the ad that had literally just been posted within a few hours. I rang the guy and I managed to pick up his baby. It was for a really good price. I would have never ever dreamt of even getting a lathe close to this quality and in this condition. Admittedly, it is a very early model lathe, so it's back in the 1940s or 50s, so it's a very early model. It's a Hercus lathe, so it's made in Australia. It's a 9-inch South Bend copy, so the Australian business in South Australia got a license from South Bend in America to copy the lathe, and they made some improvements and changes to it just to make it Australian. The gentleman I bought it off bought it when he was 18 from a trade school that was being closed down. It had only had a few years worth of work in the trade school. And he had had it for the rest of the time, so it was kind of like a, one owner lathe. He'd looked after it meticulously for all that time, and he'd actually upgraded to a newer metric lathe recently, a much larger one, because he's retired and he didn't really have use for this little baby one. So I have been kind of occupied. You can see I've been occupied kind of building a bench for it. I've got to put some shelves in there on both sides. I've put the bench on wheels, but it also has wind down legs, so once I find a home for it, which I think is probably there in front of the car, then I'll wind the legs down, level it up. At the moment I haven't quite finished the bench, so I've kind of kept like a few bits and pieces that need to be done, so I've got to bolt the lathe down fully to the bench properly, and then I'll have to true the lathe once I get the bench in its spot. So I'll true the back foot there. But yeah, you can see it's got everything. So it's got power cross feed, power feed in along the bed. And I was lucky, this model actually has a quick change gearbox for thread cutting. It is Imperial, it's an Imperial lathe. But fortunately these lathes are really well supported here in Australia. There's a real little kind of hobbyist enthusiast industry, so you can get a metric thread cutting gear set that sits in that gearbox, which is really cool. So you can cut metric threads, and you can even get a plate that looks exactly like the old one. But it's just got all the metric gears in there, which is pretty cool. And you've got your little gear change in the back here for different speeds on your thread cutting, forward and reverse, so you can cut left and right-handed threads, which is really cool. Interestingly, it has like a plain bearing spindle, so you've got to like put oil in all these little ports all the time, which is pretty old-fashioned, but when the lathe was at the gentleman's house, he did a witness cut for me, and it was within 0.01 of a thousandth of an inch across 9-inch cut. And that was 9 inches, not suspended by the tailstocks, just hanging out. So the spindle is incredibly accurate for a lathe of its age, and the bed was within a very small tolerance as well, and you can see the ways are absolutely immaculate. So the machine's been really looked after. There's not a great deal of backlash in any of the feeds. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird old one. You've got this kind of top assembly up here that allows you to adjust speeds, and it's kind of got like a pivot on it, so it allows you to drop this down, change your speeds, and then tighten it back up again using this lever up here, which is pretty cool. It has a single phase motor on it at the moment. Works perfectly fine. I am debating putting a 3-phase 240 volt motor on it with a variable speed drive. It allows me a little bit more flexibility across the speed range. It's a 750 watt motor. Having a look at the later model lathes where they hadn't changed any of the gearing or any of the bed or anything on it, they are putting a 1 kilowatt motor on it, so I'll probably go to a 1 kilowatt 3-phase motor on this machine, just to give me a bit more flexibility at with the various speeds. But I mean, I'm so excited about it. It came with absolutely everything, all of the tools that the lathe came with from factory. It came, it's got a 4-jaw chuck, 3-jaw chuck, traveling steady, fixed steady. It has all of the high accuracy drill chucks. It has a live center, dead center. It has a little collet chuck for center drills in the tailstock. He's even gave me a quick change tool post that had been modified to fit this lathe as well. The only thing about it is it's a bit too chunky in this dimension, so I'm going to take that to a machine shop and they can mill the bottom of it off for me and reduce the size, and that'll allow me to take a lot broader range of tool sizes, because at the moment you can only take a 6 or an 8 mil tool size, because otherwise the bottom of the tool post sits a bit too high for the center of the chuck. So that's something that he gave to me. Some work colleagues of mine were kind enough, they also gave me a quick change tool post, so I've got 2 tool posts and a bunch of tool holders, so that's really cool. And yeah, like I got this kind of really cool box of goodies. Like I got all kinds of stuff in here. There's like little custom cutting tools, like boring bars and things that he's made over all of these time that take these little tiny pieces of tool steel in the end. Heaps of stuff in there, and I've got a whole pile of stuff on the floor as well for the machine. So apologies about the tip of the shed. So you can see all of my shit everywhere, and also hear me tripping over everything. But that's it's kind of chaos because the lathe came in 1,000 pieces in 1,000,000 boxes. So I've spent weeks putting it back together again. So you can see all of this was stripped down. The only thing that the lathe had on it was the headstock spindle and basically the ways, and that was it. Everything else was pulled off it. So it was actually kind of really good because it gave me a chance to really understand the machine as I put it together, which is really important. But yeah, I'm super stoked. Everything on this machine is just in incredible condition. It really is. It's beautiful. One thing that's really cool about the machine is it's really small, but it actually has a really big chuck. And I was reading about this, and they developed these lathes for small hobbyists or machine shops, or to put in the back of places where they repair cars or things like that back in the day. So they made these so you can work on and repair the machine yourself, which was really interesting. That was part of the ethos around the design. So a lot of the things in here you can make with the lathe to repair the lathe. which is really interesting. So you can make yourself new spindle bearings if you need to, and there's instructions in the book on how to do that. So you can make new pulleys out of cast iron or steel. You can make all of the things on this machine, except for obviously the major castings, but anything to repair the machine and upkeep the machine, you can make on the machine. So they put a really big chuck on the machine so you can do really big work. And I was a bit skeptical about it. But when I was at the guy's house, he showed me, and he was turning a 5-inch diameter, 4.5-inch long piece of billet steel for an application. And then he took it out of this machine and put it in his new lathe, which is much larger, has a 4 kilowatt motor on it, variable speed drive, and the new lathe wasn't turning it any faster than this machine did, which really shocked me. And he said, yeah, they're actually a really great little versatile machine that can do a whole bunch of functions. So, super excited. But, even more exciting, finally, dun, 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 I've had my triple clamps arrive. Oh my gosh, it took so long for these to come in. So these are a 2006 RMZ set of triple clamps. Now what's really cool about it is they actually fit my fork legs. Yay! And more interestingly, look really closely here, and this is a real bonus, is that the stops on the triples, which is that little guy, are actually on the top, not on the back of the fork like the original ones. So they hit the original stops on the frame. Admittedly, I have to put a little bit extra steel in here, maybe about a centimeter, but I'll be able to weld just a little block in there, which is much easier than having to fabricate some crazy thing in here to stop the triples from smashing into the frame. So that's a real added bonus. So 2004 to 2006 RMZ triples will fit nicely straight into early model Suzuki frames, with some bearing modifications in here, which is no big drama, and the stop blocks hit the frame, and the spindle length on the head stem that goes through is almost exactly perfect. You can see up here I don't have to modify that at all. Admittedly, I haven't got the bearing races sitting here, so you can see this. They're a little bit loose. You can see the old bearings hanging out there. But it'll be pretty damn close, so there'll be enough adjustment on that without having to modify any of the original head stem, which is pretty cool. Interestingly, you see here's the 2010 RMZ ones. See the bolts are on the side, on the front, and on the side on the back, on the upper and lower triple. So there's a slight design change there. The other design change I did notice also is that the handlebars sit sort of a bit back on the fork, not too far back, but if you look on these ones, they actually sit really far back. They actually sit almost right behind the fork, which is really interesting. So they went to further forward, so they've obviously extended or opened up the rider's position a little bit from the earlier model to the later model. So that's super exciting. So that's really exciting. There's another couple of things that's happening as well. So now I have a lathe. I can repair my mill. So the milling machine, or drill mill, it's a very old McPherson mill. It's about the same age as the lathe. So surprise, surprise, Ray likes old tools. So you can see that this is the inside of the spindle. So this is where the chuck goes inside. Now, that is a standard spindle for a standard good old-fashioned drill chuck. It's a Morse taper. So the problem with that is that that won't tolerate any downwards force that's trying to pull the chuck out of the collet. It locates in there nicely and holds in there nicely, but it won't tolerate any of that. So mills have a drawbar in them that goes into the back of the chuck or collet chuck and pulls the chuck up into the taper. Now, did a bit of digging, and this original mill actually had a locking collar that goes on here and locked on to a special collet chuck back in the day. So I am going to make or remake that locking collar out of a piece of T6. So I'll bore the center of that out, and I will remake the locking collar according to the original designs. So I have MTA Morse Taper 2 collet chuck. So it's an ER32. So it'll tape most collets. So I got one of those in off AliExpress, and I got myself some really nice collets. I was a bit dubious about the quality, but I've checked the run out and everything on those, and they're actually, for the money, really, really good. So I think all of these collet chucks, all of these collets in this chuck was like under $100 Australian delivered. So I was expecting total crap, but it was really good. So I have that, and I will be able to put my milling machine together. I've got to get an X and Y table to go on the mill, and I already have on this a three-phase inverter or variable speed drive set up. So I've got variable speed on the front, enable, and away we go. And luckily this old machine had a three-phase motor on it that was that allowed me to have star delta configuration on it. Now some people are said to me, oh, why bother trying to set up this machine, you know, blah blah blah, it's only an old shitty drill mill. It is actually super heavy. The machine weighs nearly 300 kilos. It has a heavy cast iron bed on it that's set up for milling. It has that pole on it, or the totem, is actually a solid bar with a hole bored down the middle. So when I pulled the machine apart to restore or give a restoration, I thought it was hollow and I thought it was super light, and I almost killed myself. So yeah, so it's not going to flex very much, and you can see that the top of the machine is, you know, massive cast iron machine. So I think it'll do light milling work just fine. I don't think I can do massive heavy cuts, you know, 10mm cuts, you know, running at crazy high speeds, but I'm not interested in doing that. I'm only interested in doing light work. Yeah, so look, that's a real quick update, guys. So I get to stand around and have some lathe porn for a few hours, but I'll be getting stuck back into the bike now. My attention's off my new pride and joy, and actually get and use my new pride and joy. Anyway, dudes, thanks for hanging out. Catch you next time. Bye.